Okay. Hello, everyone, and thank you guys so much for joining us today on our Friday weekly webinar. Today's topic is details on the I-751 petition to remove conditions on residence and frequently asked questions. Today, I'm joined by our awesome associate attorney, Cynthia Milian. And just a little background on her. She's the associate attorney here at Powers Law Group. She's been with PLG for a while now.
So we're going to talk today about the I-751. What is a conditional residency? Talk a little bit about what are the requirements to file a joint application if you have dependents, if for some reason you missed the deadline to file, or if you need to file a waiver, what are the different documents that need to be included, or what factors does USCIS look into to adjudicate those types of applications. So let's dive right in. What is conditional residency? So the conditional residency is part of the Immigration, Marriage, Fraud Amendment Act of 1986. And it's conditional because an individual that receives their green card before, or if they've been married less than 2 years, then they're only going to be given a 2-year green card, right? It's conditional. And you have to remove those conditions in order for you to get the permanent green card, which is a 10-year card. So it's very important that you file this. If you don't file it timely, you can get referred to court. You have an option to submit it at that point, right? You can still submit it with USCIS, but it's very important that you don't miss this deadline. So what is the I-751 application? Is a petition to remove the conditions on the residence based on marriage. So you are required to file it jointly, but there's waivers, as I mentioned, that you can use if for some reason the marriage ends on divorce, or if there was abuse, so on and so forth. So the eligibility to file this is if you're still married to the U.S. citizen, a lawful permanent resident after 2 years, or if your parent is still married to the same U.S. citizen spouse or lawful permanent residence after 2 years, and if you're not included in your parent's I-751. So you can derive benefits if you have children, but there's special clauses for when derivatives may need to include their own I-751 or file it. So for a joint petition, you have to include evidence from when your initial application was approved until, the moment that you're filing this joint petition, right? You want to make sure that you include more evidence of your life together, bona fides, like they say in immigration. If there are any more leases, if you've purchased a home, if you've had a child, if you've taken trips, you want to include photos of that. If you have utility bills, all of that information to show immigration that, that you are still a valid couple and that you two remain together, and you have the proof to show that. So it's very important, like I said, that you file it timely. You want to file it, start working on everything. You can file it about 90 days before the 2-year green card expires. If you don't file it timely, you can get referred to court, and you don't want that to happen. So there's also an ability for you to submit this, right? If you, you got married, you thought the person was the love of your life, but unfortunately things don't work out, then you can file it based on good faith marriage, that at the inception, at the moment that you both married, you thought that the marriage was going to, last forever, but, things happen, life happens, and you divorced, things didn't work out between the two of you. So you can file it based on the fact that you did have a good faith marriage, but that it ended in divorce. But you still have the burden to prove that it was valid, right? That you didn't enter that marriage only for the purposes to obtain an immigration benefit. And if you're doing this based on divorce, then you also have to include certified copies of the divorce decrees. And like I said, the dependent children, they can be included on their application, on their parents' application. But if you file your own petition, with a step parent, then you have to include a separate one. So the timing of the filing, you can file the I-751 without your spouse or step parent at any time after you're granted that conditional status, if your parent entered into a good faith marriage, and if your spouse or step parent subsequently died, if the marriage ended in a divorce or annulment, if you were subject to extreme cruelty by your spouse, you were battered by either your parent or your spouse, or termination of your status and removal would result in extreme hardship to any dependent U.S. citizen. So, you know, proof and timing issue, right? Like we stated, you want to make sure that you include all the information. And it's just very important that you file this timely. We've seen a few cases where if you don't file it, you know, automatically USCIS will issue something called a notice to appear, where you have to go to court. And, you know, you want to prevent all of that from happening. You don't want to have to go to court and then request continuances while your I-751 is pending before USCIS, since USCIS has to adjudicate it first, right? So you want to make sure that if you have a 2-year green card, that you have those reminders in place, and that you speak to an attorney, right? You know, maybe 6 months before it expires, your 2-year green card is going to expire, so that you can get all of your documentation ready and in order to file it timely. And I think we're going to talk a little bit more later on about processing times and the extension on your 2-year green card if we see that it takes some time for you to get that I-751 approval or a decision on it. So the foreign national bears the burden of establishing the good faith marriage. So like I mentioned, you have the burden of proof, right? Whether you're going to file jointly, if you're going to file based on abuse, if you're going to file based on divorce, whatever grounds you're going to file it on, you always have the proof of showing that it was a good faith marriage. You need to show, and you can't just repeat the information that you included in your initial petition, but you need to provide fresh evidence that shows that you had a life together. If there weren't any children, maybe show that you had a joint bank account where there were withdrawals of from utility companies, or if there was payroll deposits in there. They want to see that it's an account being used by the two of you. So in some instances, there will be interviews for this, but recently we've seen that I-751s are getting approved relatively quickly when there's joint filings. And even when we've seen people get requests for evidence, we see a quick turnaround in those adjudications. So that's really good compared to what we were seeing about a year and a half ago, where it took about a year or more for an I-751 to get adjudicated. And if you don't have the opportunity to include documentation to establish that it was a good faith marriage, then you always have the opportunity to draft affidavits, right? Stating, you know, if you had a controlling partner that didn't want to add you to the lease or to the mortgage or to any of the utility bills, then you want to explain that to USCIS, so that way they could see that the lack of evidence was because of that abuse or that extreme cruelty that you faced with that spouse. And it's also helpful to have affidavits from family members if they were with you, if they experienced all this, if you had to go get counseling or therapy, then you want to include all of these evaluations and reports that can substantiate your claim of abuse or extreme cruelty. You can file late, right? Failure to file timely, it means that it automatically terminates your conditional resident status, but you can file late and you have to show good cause and what those extenuating circumstances are, right? So you want to show, for example, if you were hospitalized or you had long-term illness, or, you know, you were serving active duty in the military, you know, whatever reason that was, you want to show USCIS why it is that it took you so long to file that late. And, you know, we've been successful in filing those. Sometimes it could be a minor error. It could be a few days late, from, you know, a few days to like a couple of years. But you just want to make sure that you do this correctly, right? Because you don't want to, you know, go on and think that everything's fine and apply for citizenship and you're not eligible for it because you never remove the conditions. So it's very important that you take this step and that you do this timely. And, you know, as I stated, there are waivers available. You file it with the same form, except that you would include different evidence, right? Evidence of good faith marriage plus evidence of whatever waiver you are requesting, along with in the application. So if it's extreme hardship, battery, or cruelty, you're going to have to include evidence of those grounds to substantiate your I-751 waiver. So for example, if it's battery or cruelty, you have to show that the marriage was entered into good faith. Again, you always have to show that. And then you're going to have to include any credible evidence. So if there's police reports, if there was physical abuse or anything like that, you want to include evidence of those police reports. You want to show proof, like I mentioned earlier, if you went to a therapist, if you received assistance at a shelter, all of that to substantiate that battery or cruelty. There's also the hardship waiver, right? You need it if you want to show that if you don't have battery or cruelty, you can also show that the extreme hardship that will result if you are removed, and that hardship period only arose during those 2 years, that 2-year conditional residence period. Right? So what happens if the original petitioner passes away? There is no separate waiver required. You still need to comply with the requirements of the joint petition, show the validity of the marriage, the timely filing, and include the evidence of the death, right? The death certificate. And you want to include that your relationship was valid. It's just that unfortunately the petitioner passed away. So that's a very quick, FAQ on I-751s. The main thing, 3 things that you should take away from this is file timely, right? That's very important. You want to file these, you be prepared and file them timely. You don't want a court referral for this. Always have your evidence, right? I always tell clients whenever they get a conditional card, as soon as they get it, to start collecting evidence from that moment on, so that way you don't have a lot to do whenever it's time to file the I-751. And the third thing is that we've seen faster processing times in adjudications for I-751, which is good. But I didn't have a slide for this, but if for any reason you file an I-751, the I-751 typically gives you an extension of about 18 to 24 months on your current green card. If for any reason, it takes longer than that, then you can get stamps on your passport. But we've seen a lot faster processing time, so hopefully you don't have to get to that point in your waiting period. So thank you so much. If y'all have any questions, you can drop them down below, or you can give us a call, and I'll have Dana give you those phone numbers so that we can discuss more any questions you may have on the I-751, the petition to remove the conditions on your green card. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cynthia, for all this awesome information. And again, guys, if you, for whatever reason, have a question or may not have understood, please give us a call at 713-589-2085. And you can also shoot us an email at contact@rubypowerslaw. And again, if you missed any of our past presentations or would like to recommend a topic to us, please let us know. We are always open to suggestions, and you can check out our social medias as well. For any past webinars that you have missed, you can find them on our YouTube, Facebook, and our LinkedIn now. So we're really excited about that. And next week, if you all are interested in joining, next week we're going to be talking on a webinar. Our webinar topic is going to be on court and bonds for immigration court. So we got some really good information going for that. We're hoping for just to start getting going over there. So we'll got some good updates on that, but thank you all again for joining us, and we hope to see you all on the next one. I'll be dropping the registration link down below so y'all can register for next week's webinar.